Your history.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sarnia Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are tired for paying for the Prime Minister's mistakes. His failure to balance the budget combined with his out-of-control spending is causing life to be unaffordable for many Canadians. It was recently reported that 46% of Canadians are less than $200 away from insolvency. Yet the Prime Minister is forcing a carbon tax that will drive up the costs of everything and do nothing for the planet. Canadians know that in order to keep running deficits and tweeting out taxpayer dollars to the world, the Prime Minister will continue to reach into the pockets of seniors, soccer moms, and veterans. But there's hope, Mr. Speaker. In October, Canadians can choose our leader. He will work to make life affordable for hardworking Canadians. He will balance the budget. He will keep his promises. The next 9 months can't go fast enough for me and the rest of Canadians who are sick of paying for the Prime Minister's mistakes.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Cathedral is a place of worship, a place of prayer, and a place of hope. What happened yesterday in Jolo, Philippines is a despicable act of cowardice, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all my colleagues that we condemn this vicious act of terrorism. My deepest condolences go out to all the families affected by this tragedy in the Philippines. May we pray for those that have left this world and a speedy recovery for those injured. Here at home, our thoughts are also with the Filipino and Catholic communities, and especially with the Filipino-Canadian Association of Vaughan. My prayers are with each and every one of you during this time of mourning. It is now more important than ever to keep our faith, to have confidence, trust, and belief in our values among our brothers and sisters. Mr. Speaker, we all have a right to gather in safety and reverence, no matter what our religious affiliation is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Bourassa.
Monsieur le Président, aujourd'hui, Mon vélo raconte vient d'être acclamé lauréat 2018 du prix d'histoire du gouverneur général pour l'excellence en programme communautaire. Deux organismes du comté de Bourassa, la Société d'histoire et de généalogie de Montréal-Nord et les artistes en art visuel du nord de Montréal se sont illustrés de façon remarquable. Ils ont organisé le défilé Mon vélo raconte pour célébrer le 375e de Montréal avec 375 vélos allégoriques. Plus de 15 000 bénévoles et 3 000 enfants ont participé à la conception de cette œuvre artistique. Cette distinction honore l'action communautaire des organismes. Leur succès, c'est aussi le succès de toute la communauté nord-montréalaise. Chers collègues, joignez-vous à moi pour féliciter les instigateurs de ce chef-d'œuvre, messieurs Sergio Gutiérrez et Jean-Paul Guillard. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the world marked Holocaust Remembrance Day on the 74th anniversary of the liberation of the notorious Nazi death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1945. The Allied soldiers who entered that terrible place documented unspeakable horrors, documentation that inspired citizens and governments around the world to confront hatred, to promote human dignity, and to pledge never again. In recent years, we've seen an alarming resurgence of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, despite the creation of inspirational architectural tributes around the world, just like Canada's National Holocaust Monument just down the street. Which is why, Mr. Speaker, it is so important that we continue to work to ensure that this generation and all future generations address Holocaust remembrance as a moral duty to educate, to reject anti-Semitism and hate speech and hate crimes in all forms, and to re-energize the original powerful covenant, never again.
Well said.
The honourable member for Don Valley East.
Mr. Speaker, welcome to all my colleagues to this new chamber and best wishes to all for 2019. I rise today to highlight some of the concrete work our government is doing to help Canadians succeed economically. Our government has cut taxes by 7% for 9 million Canadians, enabling them to be more prosperous. In my riding of Don Valley East, the Canadian Child Benefit has alleviated 9,000 families and 17,000 children out of poverty. Our national housing strategy has benefited 68 housing projects in my riding. Our CPP enhancement, increases in OAS and GIS has helped 16,000 seniors in my riding. Mr. Speaker, these numbers say it all. I am proud to be part of a government that invests in its people and ensures that all Canadians have a chance at prosperity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
There was a time when some people and even some governments believed the best way to help those who struggled, who were poor, sick, disabled, and homeless, was simply to lead them to those struggles. Sooner or later, they would simply pull themselves up by their proverbial bootstraps, and magically all would be solved. Our federal Liberal government disagrees and understands that sometimes people need a hand up. That's why I'm proud of our national housing strategy that invests $40 billion to improve Canadians' access to safe, affordable housing, with the first project being built right in my home city of Calgary. Investing in housing affords people a sense of dignity, a sense of purpose, and a place where they can build their lives. Because let's think about it. How can you build a life if you don't have a home? In short, you can't.
The honourable member for Red Deer Mountain View.
Mr. Speaker, on January 12th, our nation's flag flew at half-staff to honour Alberta's long-serving parliamentarian, Myron Thompson. Today, in this interim chamber, I'm proud to give our respects to my mentor, friend, and constituent, a man that proudly served Central Alberta. On a parliamentary visit to Washington, Myron was greeted by President George W. Bush, where his baseball experiences made him the center of attention. Unfortunately, as a 19-year-old back catcher behind Yogi Berra, Myron realized a different path would need to be followed. Myron and his family chose Sundre as their home. Myron was a teacher, a principal, and mayor of Sundre before being elected in 1993 as the MP for Wild Rose, and he served them well. On December 19th, I was honored to be with Myron, his family, and friends as the street in front of his home was named Myron Thompson's Way. On behalf of my constituents and a grateful nation, I will be honored to present our flag to his beloved wife, Dot. Myron, you will be missed, but your impact never forgotten.
Here, here.
Honourable member for Orleans.
Mr. Speaker, for the fourth year in a row, Canada has been named the #1 country in the world for quality of life. Canada ranked highest for political stability and a strong job market, to name but a few. Unemployment is at historic lows, the economy is strong, and more Canadians than ever before are hard at work. In the context of Small Business Week, our government has been working hard to make it easier to do business here in Canada by lowering the small business tax rate from 11 to 9%. Monsieur le Président, nous avons de nombreuses raisons d'être reconnaissants de vivre au Canada, mais il reste encore beaucoup à faire, bien sûr. Poursuivons notre travail acharné pour que tous les Canadiens aient une chance réelle et équitable de réussir. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Honourable member for Windsor West.
Paul Henderson was born January 28, 1943, near Kincardine, Ontario. His first experiences with hockey came in the basement of a Chinese restaurant operated by Charlie Chin, an immigrant who settled in Lucknow. Henderson played with Chin's sons. They bought him his first set of hockey equipment. He played 13 NHL seasons with the Red Wings, Maple Leafs, and Flames, and 5 more with the World Hockey Association, scoring 376 goals and 758 points in 1,000 games. Best known for leading Team Canada to a victory at the 1972 Summit Series against the Soviet Union, it was a battle for hockey and culture supremacy. He scored the game-winning goal in the 6th, 7th, and 8th games, the last of which has become legendary, making him a national hero and voted the sports moment of the century. Henderson is a member of the Order of Ontario and Canada and is a Canada Sports and International Ice Hockey Federation Hall of Fame inductee. Speaking for all goalies, Mr. Speaker, I urge the Hockey Hall of Fame to complete this wonderful story by giving us relief by getting him out of our crease and into the hall where he belongs.
Honourable member for Portage Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, while this Prime Minister shamefully refuses to ever balance the budget, hardworking Canadians are being forced to pay for his countless mistakes. These mistakes are leading to increased debt and higher taxes for all Canadians. Be under no illusions. If this Prime Minister is re-elected, taxes on everything will go up.
That's right.
And while he may never have had to worry about his own personal finances, hardworking Canadians are worried about paying their bills. Because unlike this Prime Minister, Canadians know the budgets don't balance themselves. Canadians know that you can't borrow your way out of debt. And Canadians know that you can't spend money that you don't have. Simply put, Canadians can't afford another 4 years of this Prime Minister. But thankfully, relief is just around the corner. On October 21st, only the Conservative Party will end deficits, balance the budget, and help hardworking Canadians get ahead. We'll fix the Prime Minister's mistakes, lower taxes, and finally get Canada back on track.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Speaker, I rise today to honor Canadian hockey legend Paul Henderson. It was September 28, 1972, 2:30 p.m., third period, 34 seconds left to play when he scored the goal heard around the world. Actually, around the universe, Mr. Speaker. That goal won the critical game between Canada and the Soviet Union. Henderson actually scored 7 goals in the 8 games in 1972. He scored the game winner in Game 7 with 2:03 to play and thought that was it. He'd never score a goal like that again, and yet 2 days later he scored the most famous goal in hockey history. Paul Henderson was a most incredible player. Memorial Cup winner, he led the OHL in goals, he played in 2 Stanley Cup finals, 2 All-Star games, he was the last player in the original 6 era to record a 4-goal game, and he played over 1,000 pro games, scoring over 700 points. Mr. Speaker, Henderson should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yes. Yes.
Today, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I'm not done.
Today's is...
Thank you for the thrills and all the memories.
Yes.
We'll hear a little more later about our special guest. I have the honor to inform the House that the Clerk of the House has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a certificate of the election and return of Mr. Barrett, member for the Electoral District of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Honored to present to you Michael Barrett, member for the Electoral District of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat. Monsieur le Président, j'ai l'honneur de vous présenter Michael Barrett, député de la circonscription électorale de Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands et Rideau Lakes, qui a prêté serment à signer le registre et réclame maintenant le droit de siéger.
Let the member take his seat for la députée Jean-François. Questions orales, oral questions, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the Prime Minister's foreign policy is a disaster and Canadians are paying for his mistakes. Our international partners have no respect for this Prime Minister, and why should they? After clowning around in India and inviting a convicted terrorist along with him, he then was forced to take concession after concession from Donald Trump. He even angered our partners in Japan and Australia. And now we have the debacle with China. Why did the Prime Minister show such weakness and wait so long to fire his ambassador?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I look forward to answering the member's question shortly, but I think before we do, we need to take a moment to recognize and applaud the extraordinary women and men who worked so hard to build this beautiful chamber for us to serve in, and to remember that if we who serve Canadians in this place work even half as hard as they worked to build this place for us, we will be very well served as a country indeed.
Monsieur le Président, la politique étrangère du Premier ministre est une catastrophe et les Canadiens paient pour ses erreurs. Un terroriste reconnu coupable a été invité en Inde. Les tarifs américains sur l'acier et l'aluminium restent en place. Le Premier ministre a insulté nos alliés au Japon et en Australie. Et maintenant, la crise avec la Chine. Quand le Premier ministre va arrêter de faire payer les Canadiens pour ses erreurs?
Nous agissons sur deux plans avec intégrité et fermeté. D'abord, d'assurer la sécurité des Canadiens, d'obtenir la libération des deux Canadiens qui ont été détenus de façon arbitraire en Chine, ainsi que de pousser pour la clémence pour le troisième. Et en même temps, de s'assurer que nous sommes toujours là pour se tenir debout pour la règle de droit, pour l'indépendance de notre système judiciaire et effectivement de parler avec nos alliés à travers le monde pour s'assurer que tout le monde comprend que le Canada défendra toujours la règle de droit.
L'obsession.
Monsieur le Président, pour le Premier ministre, l'argent est le moindre de ses soucis. Il n'a jamais eu à faire de budget pour lui-même. Ce n'est pas surprenant qu'il croit que les budgets s'équilibrent d'eux-mêmes. Tout ce qu'il sait faire est de s'endetter davantage et qui fait-il payer? Les Canadiens. Monsieur le Président, quand est-ce que ce Premier ministre va enfin dire la vérité et admettre qu'en raison de ses erreurs, il va augmenter les taxes et les impôts?
Monsieur le Président, notre plan était d'investir dans les gens, dans la classe moyenne, dans nos communautés. Et à cause de ça, on a réduit les impôts pour la classe moyenne tout en demandant aux mieux nantis de payer plus d'impôts. On a créé, les Canadiens ont créé 800 000 emplois au cours des 3 dernières années. On est en train de vivre une très bonne croissance économique et le plus bas taux de chômage en 40 ans. Nous allons continuer d'investir dans les Canadiens et dans la classe moyenne pendant que les conservateurs veulent donner des bénéfices aux mieux nantis parce qu'ils pensent que c'est comme ça qu'on crée la croissance économique, mais ils se trompent.
Mr. Speaker, it's not surprising the Prime Minister doesn't worry about Canadians' money. He's never had to worry about money. He's never had to balance a household budget, so he thinks that budgets balance themselves. He thinks he can borrow his way out of debt and that others should pay for his mistakes. So it's no wonder that the debt has grown 3 times more than what he promised. So why won't he tell the truth before the next election, that his wasteful spending and runaway deficits will mean higher taxes for Canadians?
Prime Minister.
It's no surprise that all we get from the Conservatives are warmed over Stephen Harper attacks and an economic plan that failed Canadians for 10 years. They continue to want to give tax breaks to the wealthiest, where we're focused on growing the middle class by investing in people and in their communities. We lowered taxes for the middle class and raised them on the wealthiest 1%. And that has led to not only stronger growth than Stephen Harper ever saw, but it's led to the creation of 800,000 jobs and the lowest unemployment rate in almost over 40 years. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to invest in Canada.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, everything the Prime Minister just said is false. With his changes, the richest Canadians are paying less in tax, and hard-working Canadian families are paying more. And they're going to continue to pay more because government documents show that the carbon tax will rise 6 times higher than what the Prime Minister now admits, which means higher gasoline costs and higher home heating costs. Canadians are already paying for his mistakes, so why is he also covering up the real cost of his carbon tax from Canadians?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Taxes for the middle class, and the only way the Conservatives make those numbers work if they completely ignore a policy they voted against, the Canada Child Benefit. The Canada Child Benefit has made more difference in the lives of hardworking Canadians than any other policy in recent history. They voted against it, and maybe they don't want to talk about it because they plan to take it away from Canadians. Well, we are going to continue to invest in Canadians. When it comes to climate change, it's been 274 days since the member opposite promised a climate plan for Canadians. Where's that plan?
L'accès au logement est un enjeu de plus en plus grave au Canada. C'est un enjeu qui est problématique pour les acheteurs qui se voient exclus d'un grand nombre de marchés. C'est un enjeu qui est aussi problématique pour les locataires à faible revenu qui subissent les contre-coups de la pénurie de logements abordables et sociaux. En Colombie-Britannique, par exemple, des cas de tente de fortune poussent maintenant dans des endroits comme Maple Ridge, Nanaimo, Victoria. Ici, au Canada, au 21e siècle, le prochain budget des libéraux va-t-il refléter l'urgence de la situation? Est-ce qu'il y aura des investissements immédiats pour pallier à la crise actuelle?
Premier ministre.
Monsieur le Président, nous reconnaissons à quel point les Canadiens méritent des logements sûrs, abordables et accessibles. C'est pour ça que nous avons mis sur pied l'historique stratégie nationale sur le logement qui investit des sommes sans précédent dans le logement et qui, dès maintenant, a déjà aidé plus d'1 million de Canadiens à trouver un logement. Mais nous savons qu'il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire. Et oui, on va continuer d'investir dans les Canadiens pour assurer du logement sûr et accessible pour tout le monde.
And accessible housing for everyone.
Président, c'est des belles paroles, mais 90% de ces fonds-là ne seront pas débloqués avant la prochaine élection fédérale, avant 2020, alors que les besoins sont réels maintenant. En fait, la situation de plus d'1,5 million de foyers canadiens est criante aujourd'hui. On a besoin de nouveaux investissements maintenant, pas dans 3 ou 4 ans. Les solutions existent. On pourrait, par exemple, stimuler des investissements en supprimant la portion fédérale de la TPS-TVH sur la construction de nouveaux logements abordables. Les libéraux devraient savoir comment ça marche. Ils avaient fait la promesse en 2015, une promesse qu'ils ont reléguée par la suite aux oubliettes. Alors je pose ma question encore une fois. Ils auront une dernière chance avec le budget fédéral. Vont-ils investir et agir maintenant?
Premier ministre.
Encore une fois, Monsieur le Président, je souligne que les investissements qu'on a fait depuis plusieurs années de façon historique dans le logement ont aidé plus d'1 million de Canadiens à trouver un logement abordable. Nous savons que ça prend encore des investissements et on va avoir encore des solutions à mettre sur pied, mais ne nous trompons pas, les investissements qu'on a déjà faits, qu'on est en train de faire dans la stratégie nationale du logement, sont en train de faire une grosse différence dans la vie des gens.
For New Westminster, Burnaby.
Just last week, media reports said that 46% of all Canadians are now only $200 away from financial insolvency in a month. But instead of bringing in immediate relief for people facing a housing crisis and crushing personal debt, the Liberals' priority has been to give billions of dollars in corporate giveaways. This Liberal government continues to tell Canadians to wait for real action on housing. Will the Prime Minister commit to making different choices this year? Will he make affordable housing a top priority in this year's budget?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 3 years, indeed over the past 3 budgets, we made housing a priority for Canadians. We know that it needs to be safe, affordable and accessible for all Canadians. That's why we move forward with a historic national housing strategy that re-engages the federal government in housing right across the country. And we haven't waited to invest. On the contrary, the significant investments we've already made have helped close to 1 million Canadians access more affordable housing. That is making a real difference now and, yes, many years into the future.
New Westminster, Burnaby.
That answer shows how out of touch the Prime Minister is, and people know it. Take Sarah, for example. She's a nurse with 3 children, struggling to find affordable housing in Burnaby, BC. The only places she can find will take her entire paycheck, leaving no money for food or for anything else. That's the reality of the housing crisis. Mayors from across the country are raising housing with the Prime Minister today, saying we need action now. Will the Liberals stop siding with corporations and side with people who need affordable housing now?
Well, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to sit down with the big city mayors this morning who thanked me and congratulated me for the work we've done on investing in housing right across the country. We are making a real impact in the lives of Canadians as we invest in housing that is making a significant difference in people's lives. We will continue to do just that while we focus on making a concrete and sure difference in the lives of Canadians right across the country.
Député de Richmond-Tabasca.
Monsieur le Président, on s'enligne sur un déficit cumulé de plus de 80 milliards pour ce mandat libéral. Pourtant, le Premier ministre avait fait la promesse formelle en 2015 que nous serions en équilibre budgétaire à la fin de cette année. Le directeur parlementaire confirme qu'avec l'irresponsabilité du Premier ministre et de son ministre des Finances, nous ne retournerons pas à l'équilibre budgétaire avant 2040. Le Premier ministre aime bien dire à tout le monde que les budgets s'équilibrent tout seuls. Peut-il nous dire maintenant qui va payer pour ces déficits?
Honorable ministre des Finances.
Nous étions clairs. Nous allons faire des investissements en Canadiens et Canadiennes. C'est très important pour améliorer leur situation. On a fait des investissements dans la classe moyenne et on a eu des résultats très importants. Maintenant, on a un niveau de chômage le plus bas pendant plus de 40 ans. On a un niveau de croissance important en même temps. Nous allons continuer de faire des investissements. Ça, c'est très important pour l'avenir. Et en même temps, on peut faire avec une approche responsable au niveau budgétaire.
Monsieur le Président, nouvelle Chambre des communes, encore les mêmes réponses. Pourquoi le Premier ministre ne dit simplement pas la vérité aux Canadiens et Canadiennes? Il n'a pas de plan et malheureusement, ce sont les citoyens qui vont devoir payer pour son irresponsabilité et son manque de rigueur dans la gestion du budget. Monsieur le Président, ce n'est pas la population à payer pour ses échecs, ses erreurs et sa façon de gérer de façon irresponsable et incontrôlable le budget. Alors, va-t-il au moins avoir le courage de dire aux travailleurs et aux Canadiens qui va payer pour ces déficits?
Ministre des Finances.
Monsieur le Président, heureusement, je peux dire que pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiens, nous sommes dans une meilleure situation maintenant à cause de notre approche. Avec nos investissements, on a plus de travail à travers le pays, c'est vrai. Et on a en même temps une situation où la classe moyenne paye moins des taxes. Ça, c'est certain. Donc, avec notre approche, c'est beaucoup mieux pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiennes. Et on peut le faire en même temps avec un niveau d'aide PIB qui fonctionne pour l'avenir pour notre pays.
Member from Milton.
This Prime Minister and this Finance Minister promised Canadians that they would get rid of the deficit by this year, and they have clearly failed. We find ourselves in a situation where the rich are actually paying less taxes, and in their spending review, they didn't find any ways to save money, but they did find ways to spend more. Wow. Fail. Mr. Speaker, Canadians will ultimately pay for these mistakes. Will the PM admit to Canadians that his higher deficits will lead to higher taxes for Canadians?
What we've done over the last more than 3 years is make a real important difference for Canadians with higher growth rates, with lower unemployment. Clearly, the approach that we've taken has worked. The option that we took last election was the approach of austerity and cuts, which is being proposed by the Conservative Party at that time, versus our approach of investing in Canadians. What we've been able to show is our approach works, we can do it in a fiscally responsible way, and we will continue to have a plan that makes sense for Canadians.
Honourable member for Milton.
Talking points are all an attempt to make sure that they don't panic the flock before the fleecing. That's what it's all about. How can the finance minister stand here and honestly say that Canadians are doing better when 46% of Canadians feel that they are $200 away from insolvency? And I know the Prime Minister and the finance minister haven't felt this, but I can tell you something. You lose sleep and the anxiety is crushing. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that they are not in good shape and they're afraid of these new taxes. When will the Prime Minister level with them and just tell them more taxes are coming?
The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we've been very clear. Actually, middle-class anxieties are something that we have been very focused on from day one. That is why we reduce taxes on middle-class Canadians, a policy that the Conservatives voted against. That is why we put in place the Canada Child Benefit, helping 9 out of 10 families with more money. On average, middle-class families with 2 kids this year will have $2,000 more than they had when the last government was there in 2015. We are helping with middle-class anxieties while the opposition continues to vote against policies that help these people.
Monsieur le Président, 2019 est une année historique. Il était prévu que nous allions avoir une nouvelle Chambre des communes, c'est fait. Ils avaient promis un budget équilibré, ça ne se fera pas. Ça, c'est la réalité libérale. L'année 2019 devait être l'année du déficit zéro, c'est l'année du déficit de 30 milliards de dollars. Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente du Conseil du Trésor, dont je salue la nomination, est-ce qu'elle pourrait rassurer les Canadiens et nous dire que pour elle, un budget, ça ne s'équilibre pas par lui-même, mais que malheureusement, un déficit libéral va conduire à des augmentations de taxes et d'impôts pour tous les Canadiens. C'est ça la réalité.
Ministre des Finances.
C'est clair que nous avons un plan. C'est très clair. Un investissement dans la classe moyenne, ça fonctionne parce que maintenant notre économie fonctionne pour la classe moyenne. Mais le problème, l'autre approche, l'approche d'austérité, ça c'est vraiment pas le plan. Il y a ou les coupures ou les augmentations des taxes. Ça c'est le plan des conservateurs. Notre approche, réduire les impôts pour la classe moyenne. Et de cette façon, on a une meilleure situation maintenant.
Député de Louis-Saint-Laurent.
Je tiens à rappeler que ma question était à Madame la ministre du Conseil du Trésor. Je ne sais pas si c'est parce qu'on est en 2019 que c'est maintenant les hommes qui répondent. Monsieur le Président, le point est le suivant. Ils s'étaient engagés en 2015 à promettre zéro déficit et pourtant aujourd'hui c'est 30 milliards de déficit. C'est ça la réalité. Alors je donne une chance à nouveau à Madame la Présidente du Conseil du Trésor. Est-ce qu'elle pourrait confirmer aux Canadiens que malheureusement les déficits libéraux, ça va conduire directement à des augmentations de taxes et d'impôts pour tous les Canadiens et toutes les Canadiennes?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
L'approche que nous avons décidée est bonne pour le Canada. C'est une approche qui améliorerait la situation de la classe moyenne. Nous savons qu'il y a des anxiétés de la classe moyenne et c'est pour ça que nous devons réduire les taxes pour eux. En même temps, avec l'allocation canadienne des enfants, on a amélioré la situation pour les familles canadiennes. Avec nos mesures, notre économie est en croissance. Donc c'est une approche qui fonctionne et j'espère qu'on va continuer avec une approche comme ça pour un bon avenir.
Honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, across Canada, people are struggling with extreme cold temperatures. If you're one of the 30,000 Canadians who are homeless, finding warm shelter can mean the matter of life or death. Shelters are near capacity. People seeking refuge in tent cities are being served with eviction notices. Where are people to go? They can't wait 10 years for a national housing strategy to ramp up. Will this Liberal government step up and legislate, as promised, the right to housing for all Canadians? Yes or no?
The Minister of Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to say first that our government believes very strongly in the rights of every Canadian to have a safe, affordable and accessible home. And that's why since 2015 we have invested $5.7 billion in addition to the dollars already forecast to help 1 million families in Canada having access to a safe and affordable home. And that's why in November 2017 we announced the first ever national housing strategy, which is going to reduce chronic homelessness by at least 50% and renew federal leadership and partnership in housing.
Member for Timmins, James Bay.
We're now 3 weeks into the state of emergency, the deplorable humanitarian crisis in Cat Lake, and temperatures have plunged to minus 55 degrees. We have hundreds of people huddled in squalid conditions. People are at risk. And yet the best the minister's been able to do after 3 weeks is to promise to send some bureaucrats to check on the situation. That's not going to cut it. What steps will this minister take to meet with the leadership, to put in place an emergency response team now, and to visit Cat Lake so he can see the deplorable conditions that the people of Cat Lake are living in? What will he do?
Indigenous Services.
Safety of First Nations communities is of utmost importance. I have spoken with Chief Kiwa Kapow, and I've affirmed our commitment to working with Cat Lake to address the community's housing needs. Officials will be meeting with the leadership there tomorrow to work on an action plan to help them work on the serious challenges that they confront. We will continue working in partnership with First Nations communities to advance their priorities and to support community-led solutions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Carleton.
Le Premier ministre aime se vanter de sa grande fortune familiale. Mais parce qu'il n'a jamais eu besoin d'équilibrer le budget familial, il pense que les budgets s'équilibrent par eux-mêmes. C'est pour ça qu'il a promis que le budget allait s'équilibrer en 2019, mais maintenant il dit non, ça va prendre une autre 20 ans, Monsieur le Président. C'est clair que ces grands déficits hors de contrôle vont forcer une augmentation de taxes. Quand le Premier ministre constatera-t-il que ces déficits coûtent cher aux Canadiens?
Monsieur le Président, c'est absolument le contraire. On a fait des réductions en impôts pour la classe moyenne. Pour le député de Carleton, par exemple, on a une situation, 30 000 personnes, on a une réduction en impôts pour la classe moyenne dans cette région. En plus, il y a 16 000 personnes qui ont l'allocation canadienne aux enfants. Donc ça, c'est la vérité pour les gens dans la classe moyenne. On a amélioré leur situation et on va continuer de faire des investissements dans la classe moyenne pour améliorer notre économie et la situation pour eux.
Actually, he's raised taxes on the middle class by $800, taking away the child benefit, the tuition tax credit, taking away the child tax credit for kids' sports. He took away the tuition tax credit for textbooks. He took away the education tax credit. And that doesn't even include the carbon tax. But, Mr. Speaker, you ain't seen nothing yet. This massive Liberal deficit will lead to even more massive tax hikes after the election. Why won't they admit it? The Canadians will pay the price for their increased debt.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are getting the benefit from the choice that they made. And let's be very specific. The Canadians who live in the riding of Carleton, 30,000 of them have had a reduction in their taxes. You cannot pick and choose benefits. The fact of the matter is the introduction of the Canada Child Benefit together with the reduction in taxes means that people are better off. There are 16,000 children in the Carleton region who are getting about $4 million more than they were before this government came into power. We are going to continue to make investments, and the good news is our approach is working and our economy is doing well.
A member for Carleton.
So they targeted soccer moms with tax increases when they took away the children's fitness tax credit. They targeted students with tax increases when they canceled the education and textbook tax credits. They targeted passengers with tax increases when they took away the transit tax credit. And that doesn't even include the carbon tax on heat, groceries, and gas, nor does it include higher payroll taxes. But, Mr. Speaker, it will only get worse. This massive Liberal deficit will lead to higher taxes for Canadians. Why won't they tell people that before the election?
The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, what Canadians chose in 2015 was a government that was going to make investments, as opposed to an approach that was going to bring in austerity, to actually put us in a situation where we were trying to balance the budget on the backs of Canadians by either raising taxes or cutting benefits. So really, we have a plan investing in Canadians. The question is, what would be the Conservative plan? Would it be to cut the Canada Child benefits, or would it be to raise taxes on middle-class Canadians? We've been clear. We're helping middle-class Canadians. We'd like to hear what they would plan on doing.
Order. The member for Carleton.
Well, when we originally brought in the child benefit, three things happened. One, the budget was balanced. Two, we lowered taxes rather than raising them, as this government is now doing. And three, Liberals claimed wrongly that parents would just blow it all on beer and popcorn. But after all these years, they finally come around to our point of view on that particular issue. Unfortunately, they've taxed away the benefit with higher taxes in other areas. Will they admit that it will only get worse when this present deficit turns into future tax increases?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, in the fictional world inhabited by the member of Carleton, he pretends that things that are true aren't true. We can't say it any clearer. For the people who earn between $45,000 and $90,000, we reduce taxes in that category by 7%, which means that people up to $200,000 or so actually have reduced taxes. But for the 1%, we did increase their taxes. Then for people that are raising their children, we gave them the Canada Child Benefit, much improved. So 9 out of 10 families are better off. $2,000 more this year than in 2015. The facts are clear.
DJ James,
Monsieur le Président, le Comité des droits de l'homme des Nations Unies a statué que le Canada doit éliminer toute forme de discrimination à l'égard des femmes autochtones en vertu de la loi sur les Indiens. On est déjà passé par ce débat, Monsieur le Président, il y a 2 ans, et le mandat de ce gouvernement tire à sa fin. Est-ce que le Premier ministre va enfin remplir sa promesse d'il y a 4 ans, oui, 4 ans, Monsieur le Président, et abroger toute législation imposée unilatéralement sur les peuples autochtones?
L'égalité des sexes est une droit humaine fondamentale. Le projet de loi S3 élimine la discrimination fondée sur le sexe dans la loi sur les Indiens. Nous avons nommé Mme Dubon-Smith à titre de représentante spéciale de la ministre. Celle-ci travaillera avec nos partenaires à l'élaboration d'un plan visant à éliminer la date limite de 1951 et entreprendront des réformes plus vastes visant l'inscription, l'appartenance et la citoyenneté des
including citizenship and other matters. The member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie.
Monsieur le Président, après l'arrestation de Mme Meng, est-ce que le gouvernement avait immédiatement fait des représentations auprès des autorités chinoises pour expliquer son action, ou est-ce qu'il a tout simplement attendu calmement que la situation explose? Le départ de M. McCallum n'est que le dernier exemple de leur manque de préparation. Ce chaos est inacceptable. Alors, comment les Canadiens peuvent-ils faire confiance à un gouvernement qui ne fait qu'improviser avec une superpuissance sur la scène mondiale?
Mr. Speaker, our government is doing a lot. Our priority, absolute priority, is the well-being and security of Canadians held in China. And we now have the support of a broad coalition of our allies: Australia, the European Union, France, Germany, the UK, the US, Holland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and Spain. All these countries have spoken out in support of the Canadian position.
Honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government has proven that it is a strong advocate for small businesses and is committed to helping them start up, scale up, and access new markets. As a small business owner myself in my riding of Kitchener Centre, I know that small businesses employ so many of my constituents and keep our economy strong. Could the Minister of Small Business and Export Promotion tell this House what our government has done to make it easier for our small businesses? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, order.
Ronald Labra, député de Kitchener Centre, pour sa question. Our government has lowered the small business tax 9%, giving small business owners up to $7,500 in savings. We have also cut red tape by removing 450 administrative burdens, making it easier for businesses to do business. We're working hard for Canada's small businesses because they are the backbone of our Canadian economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Les Canadiens ont perdu
perdu confiance envers la capacité du Premier ministre à défendre nos intérêts à l'international. Les catastrophes diplomatiques s'allongent. Son voyage raté en Inde, la colère de nos partenaires de l'Asie-Pacifique, son échec face à l'ELNA et maintenant nos relations avec la Chine sont en péril. Il a renvoyé son ambassadeur et sa ministre des Affaires étrangères reste invisible, alors que les vies sont en jeu. Les citoyens payent pour les échecs du Premier ministre. A-t-il même un plan pour le Chine?
Monsieur le Président, concernant la Chine, notre priorité absolue est le bien-être et la sécurité des Canadiens détenus en Chine. C'est une priorité pour le Premier ministre, pour moi et pour l'ensemble du gouvernement. Ces détentions arbitraires ne sont pas acceptables ni pour les Canadiens, ni pour la communauté internationale. Le Premier ministre a parlé avec nombreux partenaires internationaux. Tout comme moi, nous appuierons les déclarations du support de nombreux pays.
And many countries have supported our position. Member for Richmond Hill.
Canadians have lost confidence that this Prime Minister can lead our country on the world stage. His list of diplomatic disasters is rising. His appalling India trip. He has infuriated our Asia-Pacific trade partners. He failed Canada on NAFTA, and now our relationship with China is in tatters. He fired his ambassador. His foreign affairs minister is missing in action. The consequences are dire. Lives are hanging in the balance. Canadians are paying for the failures of this Prime Minister. Does he even have a plan for China?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
You know, Mr. Speaker, there are so many false claims in that question, it's hard to even know where to start. But let me make a try. When it comes to our partners in the Asia-Pacific, Canada is proud to have signed the CPTPP, which is entering into force. In fact, we are the only G7 country with trade agreements with every other G7 country. That is a diplomatic and trade triumph.
Order. The honourable member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou took place on December 1st, but the Prime Minister received an unprecedented special briefing several days before this high-profile arrest. My questions are simple. On what date was the Prime Minister first briefed, and by whom?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Speaker, when it comes to Meng Wanzhou, let me be very clear about the Government of Canada's position. First of all, Canada is a rule of law country, and we are conducting a fair, unbiased, and transparent legal proceedings. And in fact, Madame Meng is currently on bail as the court has ruled. There has been, as is correct, no political involvement in the process. Canada respects our international legal commitments, including our extradition treaty with the United States.
Honourable member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, I guess if I want straight answers on China, I should ask John McCallum. McCallum's comments show that the Liberal government has played politics with this serious diplomatic dispute with China from the start. So my question is, was the Justice Minister demoted for speaking truth to power to uphold the rule of law and stop the political games being played by the Prime Minister and his hand-picked ambassador?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the only people playing political games when two Canadians are in a difficult situation are the members opposite, and that is truly reprehensible. When it comes to the case of Ms. Meng, Canada is a rule of law country. We are proud to be a rule of law country. We have honored our extradition treaty commitments as we honor all of our international treaty commitments, and Ms. Meng has access to our impartial and fair judicial system.
For Kootenai, Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, last year when Greyhound announced it was ceasing operations, constituents in my riding were rightfully worried about how they would get from town to town. Without reliable transit, people can't access crucial services like health care, shelters for women fleeing violence, or urgently needed addiction treatment. In rural areas, people relied on Greyhound to travel to these services. The Liberal government said it would provide funding, but we haven't seen it, and people are still unable to travel. So when will the government provide safe, affordable, and accessible transit for rural and remote communities?
Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, we fully recognize that when Greyhound departed at the end of October last year, that it would leave an absence of public or transportation in the western provinces, and we immediately got on to working on a solution. We are working with the provinces, including British Columbia, my colleague's home province. We will be there if they come and request for us to help them on a cost-sharing basis. We have given that undertaking.
Député de
Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Monsieur le Président, le caucus des grandes villes du pays s'est réuni aujourd'hui à Ottawa avec un message très clair pour le Premier ministre et ses ministres. Les libéraux leur avaient promis mer et monde en matière d'infrastructures, mais on attend toujours. Les citoyens ont besoin d'investissements pour le transport en commun. La planète aussi en a besoin. Il ne faut pas oublier les petites municipalités de partout au pays qui attendent elles aussi le financement qu'on leur avait promis. Alors quand les libéraux vont-ils finir par vraiment honorer leurs promesses envers les municipalités?
Monsieur le Président, je remercie ma collègue pour sa question. Comme le Premier ministre, ce matin, j'étais avec le maire des grandes villes canadiennes, Monsieur le Président, ce qui m'a permis de parler, évidemment, avec les maires de notre plan historique dans des investissements en infrastructure de plus de 180 milliards. On voit une grande partie de nos investissements dans le transport collectif, dans des infrastructures vertes et aussi, Monsieur le Président, dans nos régions. Alors, je voudrais rappeler à mes collègues que depuis novembre 2015 à janvier 2019, c'est plus de 4 700 projets qui ont été approuvés, Monsieur le Président. Plus de 70% de ces projets-là sont en construction et ça représente plus de 18 milliards, Monsieur le Président. Nous allons continuer d'investir dans les Canadiens.
Mr. Speaker, the carbon tax will cost the average Canadian family over $2,500 this year. That's 11 cents more a liter of gas, $250 more for home heating, $100 a month more for groceries, and that's just the beginning. Canadians know that this Liberal carbon tax is not an environmental policy. It's a tax policy, punishing soccer moms, seniors on fixed incomes, and small business owners. So why is the Prime Minister forcing Canadians to pay for his mistakes with punishing new taxes on everyone?
Minister of Environment.
Canadians know that climate change is having a huge cost in terms of on our economy and on lives. But we have a plan that works, that makes life affordable, and that makes sure that we're creating the jobs of the future. Let's talk about the plan. I want to reassure the member that we have a new climate action incentive. We're putting a price on pollution, and a family of four in Ontario will get $307 back. We're also investing in public transit across the country. We're supporting innovators and entrepreneurs who are creating the solutions of tomorrow. Fortunately, the Conservatives opposite are harking back to the days of the Harper Conservatives. They have no plan.
Order. Order. The honourable member for Battleford, Lloydminster.
Well, Mr. Speaker, their plan is actually punishing Canadians for heating their homes, driving their kids to dance practice, hockey practice, wherever their daily routines are taking them. And the Prime Minister is failing to help Canadians get ahead. His carbon tax will cost them over $1,000 more on household essentials that they need. And his government plans to make it 6 times more expensive than that. Canadians are already paying for his failures. When will the Prime Minister come clean and admit the real cost of the carbon tax?
The Minister of Environment.
Speaker, Canadians are already paying the price of climate change, and it is going up every single year. It's a human cost, it's a cost to the economy, but good news, you can actually tackle climate change in a way that works, that makes life affordable, and that creates good jobs. Let me talk about the climate action incentive, that we're putting a price on pollution. It will no longer be free to pollute in the country, and a family of 4 in Ontario will get $307 back. A family of 4 in Manitoba will get $339 back. A family of 4 in Saskatchewan will get $609 back. You can tackle climate change.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker,
Canadians know that the Liberals' plan on carbon taxes is going to hurt small businesses and it's going to hurt families. Farmers in my riding didn't inherit a family fortune like the Prime Minister. They have to worry about making ends meet and can't afford the Prime Minister's new carbon tax. Worst yet, government documents now admit that to make their plan work, the carbon tax will have to be 6 times higher than the current rate. When will the Prime Minister come clean with farmers about his plan to significantly increase the cost of everything from fertilizer to shipping products to market?
Honourable Minister of Environment.
Farmers are feeling the impacts of climate change, and they're paying the price. Business people are feeling the impacts of climate change, and they're feeling the price. Soccer moms are feeling the price of climate change, and they're paying the price. That's why we've got a plan that it works, is going to make life more affordable, that's going to put more money in the pockets of families, that's going to create good jobs. We need to take action on climate change. To do not have a plan is irresponsible. It has now been 274 days since the party opposite said they'd have a plan. Where is their climate plan?
Order. Madam Member for Edmonton West will please come to order. Madam Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Unika Pista Makeo, Minister of Canadian Heritage and Multiculturalism.
Minister of Canadian Heritage and Multiculturalism. Please update the House of Canada, House on Canada's role in the initiative and the work being done to protect and revitalize Indigenous languages in Canada. I'm proud to say that the United Nations has declared 2019 the International Year of Indigenous Languages.
I'd like to thank the member from Winnipeg Centre for his questions. Il est toujours battu pour les langues autochtones avec courage, avec passion. Most of Canada's Indigenous languages are endangered due to deliberate past actions, and Canada is proud to join the world in marking the International Year of Indigenous Languages, and we thank the inspiring Indigenous languages for leaders for their tireless work. J'ai hâte de déposer, Monsieur le Président, sous peu un projet de loi co-développé avec les peuples autochtones. Un moment historique. Together, we can and we will change history.
Member for Calgary Rose Hill.
This Prime Minister has spent over $1 billion on 40,000 illegal border crossers, with more crossing every day. But today, the form that allows parents and grandparents of new Canadians who are trying to legally migrate to Canada for all of 2019 opened and closed in just 10 minutes. So under the Liberals, illegal border crossers get a red carpet welcome, and legal immigrants get the door shut in their face. Will the Prime Minister admit that Canadians reject having to pay for his unfair immigration practices?
The Minister of Immigration.
To compare records here. Under the Harper Conservatives, Canadians only had 5,000 spaces to sponsor parents or grandparents. We've increased that by 20,000. We have 20,000 spaces now that allows Canadians and permanent residents to sponsor their parents and grandparents. In addition to that, we've reduced the backlog that they left us behind by 80%. We've simplified the process. We will continue to be ambitious in immigration, and we will leave the fear-mongering to the other side.
Very good.
Having asked the question, I'd ask the member for Calgary Nose Hill to hear the answer and not interrupt throughout it. Député de Rosemont.
Dans un document soumis à l'Office national de l'énergie, l'équipe de Trans Mountain a avoué que le transport maritime associé au pipeline va avoir, je cite, des effets néfastes importants. Il reste moins de 75 épaulards du Sud et on va mettre à risque une espèce menacée. Mais c'est pas grave, c'est justifié à cause de la business. C'est écrit noir sur blanc. Est-ce que les libéraux peuvent arrêter de dire que l'économie et l'environnement, ça va ensemble? Pas cette économie-là, c'est pas vrai. Les libéraux vont-ils enfin avouer qu'en achetant Trans Mountain, Mountain, ils se sont rangés du côté du grand capital puis ont abandonné la protection de l'environnement. C'est ça la vérité.
Rather than protect our environment. That's the reality. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issues associated with the South Resident killer whale are very important. It is part of a broader conversation around biodiversity. There are three significant challenges for the killer whales: the access to food, the issues around marine shipping, and contaminants in the water, all of which exist today, all of which are the product of industrialization over the past several decades. We are working very hard through the Whales Initiative to ensure we put the killer whales back on an appropriate path to success and ensure that the environment and the economy go forward hand in hand.
From Malpeck.
Mr. Speaker, recently the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, along with the Premier of PEI, signed a framework agreement with Mi'kmaq people to address outstanding issues of Mi'kmaq rights and title. The Mi'kmaq leadership see this agreement as the beginning of a process to determine how all PEI Mi'kmaq, both on and off reserve, will benefit from their rights today and into the future. Beyond this one agreement, can the Minister explain the government's progress on renewing relationships with the Indigenous peoples of Canada?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member from Malpeck for his question and his hard work. This month in PEI, we did sign the framework agreement with Lennox Island and Abiguit First Nations and the province to establish a path forward to the recognition and implementation of Mi'kmaq inherent and treaty rights. Chief Matilda Ramjadan said, "This agreement is an important step in rebuilding our nation and bringing socioeconomic health to our people." In PEI and coast to coast to coast, our government is advancing reconciliation by working with our partners to realize self-determination.
The
honourable member for Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the National Assembly passed a unanimous motion supporting the Obélix construction contract and calling for it to be awarded to Lévis shipyards. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister is ignoring Quebec and the shipyard workers. Even the Standing Committee with its Liberal majority pointed to a total loss of resupply capacity at sea.
Méprise-t-il tant la Marine royale canadienne, les travailleurs du chantier de Québec et s'appuie sur des propos antérieurs de militaires alors que des délais considérables dans la...
Why the huge delays in the decision?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, our government is committed to making sure that the Canadian Armed Forces have all the tools necessary to do their jobs. That's what our defence policy committed to, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the workers at Davie for the Asterix who are playing a vital role. We have started steel cutting on the early blocks of the two permanent joint supply ships, and we look forward to having those in the water. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable député de Pierre Boucher, les
patriotes Verchères.
Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement du Québec demande le rapport d'impôt unique. La réponse du Premier ministre, une motion unanime de l'Assemblée nationale. Mon Dieu, ça arrive jamais, ça. Après avoir ridiculisé le Québec, c'est rendu que l'appareil fédéral au grand complet mène sa campagne de peur. À les écouter parler, c'est à croire que les 10 plaies d'Égypte vont nous tomber dessus. Le pire, c'est que ça marche, parce qu'au NPD, ils ont déjà plié. Pourquoi le gouvernement tient tant à nous imposer deux rapports d'impôt? De quoi est-ce qu'ils ont peur? Que le Québec fasse mieux qu'eux?
Monsieur le Président, l'Agence emploie plus de 5500 personnes dans l'ensemble du Québec et constitue un moteur économique important dans les villes comme Shawinigan et Jonquière. Contrairement au Bloc québécois et aux conservateurs, nous ne mettrons pas ces emplois en péril, Monsieur le Président. Cela dit, nous sommes toujours ouverts à travailler avec le Revenu Québec pour faciliter davantage la déclaration de revenus des Québécois.
Monsieur le Président, un sondage Angus Reid de la semaine dernière le démontre clairement pour que satisfaire les demandes du Québec comme le rapport d'impôt unique, c'est pas payant dans le Canada anglais. En fait, il y a tout lieu de croire que satisfaire n'importe quelle demande des Québécois, ça fait perdre des points dans le reste du Canada. C'est donc rendu que les libéraux vont refuser aux Québécois le dépôt d'un rapport d'impôt unique. Pourquoi? Pour gagner des votes dans le Canada anglais. Faut-il comprendre, Monsieur le Président, que les libéraux ont choisi leur camp et que c'est clairement pas celui des Québécois.
Monsieur le Président, combattre l'évasion fiscale à l'international, c'est une priorité pour notre gouvernement, tout comme pour les Québécois. Les accords d'échange d'informations partenaires à l'international demeurent essentiels pour s'attaquer à l'évasion fiscale. Une administration fiscale unique gérée par le Québec serait un obstacle au respect des obligations légales du Canada à l'international. De plus, pourrait causer des problèmes à ce qui a trait à la ratification des ententes internationales. Le Québec n'est tout simplement pas équipé pour combattre l'évasion fiscale internationale.
Mr. Speaker, it's been an interesting week for Canadian foreign policy. Our government recognized an opposition MP declaring himself president of Venezuela. I wish I'd thought of that. I'm going to resist the temptation to declare myself Prime Minister of Canada. Unfortunately, there are many governments around the world whose democratic legitimacy is questionable. Is Canadian government policy now to endorse coups against all of them?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the member to talk to his former colleagues in the NDP. Canadians need an apology from the member for Churchill Coatigaski and from the NDP candidate in York Simcoe for their defense of a dictatorship that has killed hundreds and injured thousands of peaceful protesters. If the NDP cannot take a firm and clear stance on the fight of the people of Venezuela for democracy, I don't know what they can take a clear position on.
Je voudrais signaler aux députés la présence à la tribune d'un illustre Canadien. Although three members during member statements have already stolen my thunder a little bit in relation to our mystery guest, but I'm pleased actually they covered important aspects of his career. 34 seconds. 34 seconds. That's how much time was left in the third period. On September the 28th, 1972, schools had stopped. My class was watching television and not, well, we were learning about how to play hockey, which was good. But that's how much time it was in the 72 Canada-Russia series when this gentleman scored the winning goal and gave Canada a victory for the ages. Mr. Paul Henderson. I invite all members to drop into room 233S behind the chamber to meet this great Canadian. That's back behind here. I know members are getting to know the locations around here. L'honorable député de Longueuil-Saint-Hubert se lève avec un appel au règlement.
Monsieur le Président, compte tenu du refus de Netflix devant la demande faite par le gouvernement du Québec au nom des gens de Lac-Mégantic et de tous les Québécois de cesser d'exploiter des images de la tragédie de Lac-Mégantic, je demande un consentement unanime de tous les députés pour la motion suivante. Que la Chambre des communes exige que Netflix Incorporé retire de son catalogue toute image de la tragédie de Lac-Mégantic qui a coûté la vie à 47 personnes et que Netflix Inc. compense financièrement la communauté de Lac-Mégantic pour avoir utilisé ces images à des fins de divertissement sans égard pour le traumatisme vécu par les citoyens, les survivants et les proches des victimes.
L'honorable député a-t-il le consentement unanime de la Chambre afin de proposer la motion? Non. J'ai entendu un no. The member for Etobicoke Lakeshore is rising on a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm almost done. Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I think you will find unanimous consent for the following motion, that given the enormous cultural significance of hockey in Canada, the House encourages the Hockey Hall of Fame to induct Paul Henderson in recognition of his incredible contribution to Canadian hockey and its history. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to move the motion? Yes. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yes. Carried. L'honorable député de Québec encore, une collègue Sorel, se lève avec le règlement.
On a point of order.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Monsieur le Président.